Hi everybody, I'm back for a couple of weeks, and I was invited by the club to come present. I'm very happy to do that. This is going to be a very practical presentation. I knew the format of this today would be the cafeteria, so it's designed to be interactive. I'm sure everyone has war stories about traveling with radios. In a club like this, we're not going to lack for material. So, as a disclaimer, anything I say, me, Pete Hadley, should not be taken as legal advice. So, we begin in Virginia, the land of the HOA, which is where I got very frustrated about having to operate with very minimal antennas, and my outlet for that is to go other places and put up antennas where nobody's around. Is small, so if people move up, maybe that'll help. On the right, it's Cape Town in the distance and the South Atlantic. This is Barcelona. I was working at Trig Point on top of a mountain, and I operated VHF 2-meter directly to Sicily over the Mediterranean, something like 400 kilometers. Chateau in France, another mountain in Spain, Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean. So the common point to all this is, to do that, I had to get the radio there, which meant I had to get it on a plane, and therein lies the problem. So between your HOA and fun lies a plane. And 95% of the problem is getting the radio onto the plane, 5% is getting it off the plane. So how many people here have taken a radio on a plane? Okay, I'm going to say that's, yeah, or domestically, doesn't matter. So I'm going to say about 10%. How many people have thought about it but then have said, I'm not going to mess with TSA, or I would do that? Okay, that's close to maybe 30%. And that's I think, a correct way of looking at the situation. So here's, the equipment you'd like to bring. I wish I had a picture from Boat Anchor Mountain. This is the closest I could come on the internet. But yeah, you've got your necessary QRP equipment there on the left. And on the right side, you've got what you have to deal with. Basically a computer bag, some kind of carry-on, and a suitcase. This is kind of the standard weights that most international airlines will give. In the US, they'll charge you for every single piece that they possibly can. Internationally, that tends to be the configuration that you get. Smaller planes, they will really crank down on the weight. 7 kilos for carry-on is what I've come across for some, but generally a little bit more. And this is what I recommend, that you have a computer bag which has so much electronic stuff in it that they really can't tell what's in there, just a mess of wires and computers and stuff, and all they know is it's computer something, it's probably okay. So it'll go through the scanner. Then a duffel sort of soft bag for carry-on that can be smushed into whatever kind of test they want to torture you to see if your bag will fit within their overhead space. And the other thing is that this bag will be your safety in case you overpack and need to offload something else. You can stick it in that bag, and it could, even if necessary, go as another checked bag if you're overweight. And finally, the checked bag. So if you go economy class, usually 23 kilos. If you go business class, usually they allow you a bit more, 30-something kilos. You're not going to get above 46. That's the maximum. People working for the airline will not lift more than 46 kilos. If you're above that, it's freight, and you have to go with a freight contractor, except for certain things like sporting equipment, weapons, animals, which does provide also some options. We'll get to that. So with frequent flyer miles, sometimes you can get more bags, you can purchase more bags, and so on, but this is what you're generally looking at. So the question is, for each item that you're going to bring, which bag does it go in? So we'll start with the transmitter, your transceiver. Which bag does the transceiver go in? And I lean towards QRP, so there's a K3 and a K3X on the left side, a UKITS H1B1 up top, and a Yaesu FT817 bottom right. They're all about the same size. They're small, so you could, in theory, put them into any of those bags. Which bag would you put them in? So your choices are computer bag, carry-on, checked. Those in favor of computer bag? All right. Those in favor of carry-on? All right, and those in favor of checked? Okay, so I wouldn't go checked because it's like putting a camera in a baggage hold. It is likely to disappear. They may not know exactly what it is, but it looks electronic and expensive, so it may disappear. So then your choices are checked or the computer bag. Now the reason that carry-on makes sense is you're not going to have to deal with the people that are doing the security screening. So you do get by that if you put it into checked. So that does make some sense. And you're less likely to have problems with things that are checked than that go through the conveyor belt and have a person right there to confront you. So there is some rationale for it. I usually put it in the computer bag, which is what I think most of the people said, because you're going to have to pull out things from your computer bag anyhow. And if it's in a mass of other things, it may or may not even get recognized. And I usually put just the radio in the computer bag, nothing else with it. So there's no question of whether I'm going to be operating it on the plane. I mean, I've had TSA ask me, you can't operate a radio on a plane. And my response to that is, well, I have a cell phone and I can't operate that on the plane, but I bring it with me as well. It's one thing to have it, it's another thing to operate it. And, there's no mic, there's no antenna. What am I going to do, right? It's just a radio. So usually when I go through security, and they do, first of all, pull out the radio, right? Don't try to just put it through the bag, because they'll notice it. It's dense. It blocks X-rays. There's a battery in it. They'll see it and wonder, what is this thing that you're blowing my plane up with? So pull it out and put it next to the computer in the bin as it goes through. And I would say about half the time they ask me, so what's this thing? And my response is, it's a radio. And I just stop there. I don't go on about HF or VHF capability or its multiple VFOs or anything. I just say it's a radio. It's a computer, it's a radio. And don't volunteer anything more. And occasionally they'll ask, so like a CB? Yeah. Right, again, I don't specify. Well, no, CB is a totally different sort of, this is part 97 of the FCC. No, it's a radio, yeah, like a CB. Like a car radio, right? Because you could put it in a car. But I don't go into the fact that it can transmit and receive and, can listen in on airline communications and things. It's just radio. So by and large, I've never had a problem going through that part of security with the transceiver. I mean, they see a lot of weird stuff, and the transceiver actually is not the biggest thing. It looks like consumer electronics, and as long as maybe they'll ask you turn it on, turn it off, it's not going to blow the plane up. They're happy. So microphone, which bag? Checked? Yeah. Or carry-on or the computer bag. I tend to put it in checked. I throw stuff into checked because that's less stuff for me to carry, and it separates it from the transceiver. So generally checked is where I put most of my stuff. Headphones. So where are headphones going to go? Checked? Carry-on, computer bag. So the secret with headphones is don't use these, use these. Right, if you're going for portable operation, there's no sense of bringing these big cans along unless you really need sound isolation. Bring 2 sets of headphones along. Put one in the computer bag so you can listen to your computer or whatever on the flight, and put the other with your radio in the checked luggage. And also, chances are you'll lose one at some point. The radio is going in the computer bag, and the headphones are going in the computer bag as well. And another set of headphones are going in the checked luggage, just because I lose headphones. All right, the HT. Now, I said the transceiver would go in the computer bag. Would you put the HT in the computer bag?
That has to be either that or the carry-on because it's got a battery.
Yeah, so the problem is the lithium battery. There's actually no prohibition against lithium batteries, but we'll get to that in a second. For some reason, HTs are seen as more of a threat than the transceivers that are kind of boxy, because it looks like you might actually pull this thing out and start using it on the flight.
I traveled several times with HT, nobody cared.
Yeah, generally they don't care. So what I do is I've been okay putting it in the computer bag. Usually I don't have both an HT and a transceiver. It's one or the other. I'm reluctant to stick it in the checked luggage because, again, it's pretty valuable. I tend not to put it in my other carry-on, the soft carry-on, just because I don't have anything else in there, and I like that one to go through without a problem. So I'll put it in the computer bag and hope again that just the massive confusion in the computer bag is enough to disguise it. And I've never been asked to dismount the lithium battery, but again, I don't put the antenna on it. And I'll say, it can't be used without the antenna, it'd burn it out. And that's usually okay for them.
I removed battery, not to turn it on accidentally,
Right.
but I leave antenna on.
Well, so the problem with removing the battery is that loose lithium batteries are even more hated than regular.
In a bag, plastic bag, in a box.
Okay, if you put it in a box, that might be good because then it looks like it might be new, and but like a spare lithium battery kicking around in your luggage anywhere is going to provoke some concern. I mean, they could take it from checked baggage. All right, the deadly rubber duck antenna. So this is the other half of the HT, and again, I tend to put it in my checked bag. When I've brought it in the computer bag, it's gone through the scanner, and if you look at these things on X-ray or in cross-section, they're basically a coil of wire. So they see this coil of wire going through, and this is what they're thinking. This is the Ninja Death Stick that's advertised on the internet. So there's the Ninja Death Stick, the police force, protect yourself, and the extensible spring coil, and one HT antenna. And they look pretty much the same, right? So they're not thinking, is this an HT antenna or not? They're thinking, is this a weapon? Even though it's only this big and really wouldn't be very effective, I avoid that issue. All right, antenna deployment aids. So this is the EasyHang antenna launcher system, which is basically a big slingshot and some shot. Does this go in your checked luggage?
Yes.
Okay, checked luggage. All right, my advice is it doesn't go in any luggage, right? Because a lot of places you go, even after you leave the airport, when you haul out this thing and start pointing it around, you're likely to provoke some local anxiety. Even in a U.S. park, in a lot of parks, it's not allowed because it's seen as a weapon. Likewise, bow and arrow for launching antennas. All right, so moving on. Probably familiar with the spud gun. Again, checked baggage, computer bag, or leave it at home. Yeah, I mean, it's just potatoes. So this is what I use. This is my antenna launching aid, and I don't pack it. I buy it when I get there.
You can't bring that through security.
Right, you wouldn't get it through security if it has liquid in it. So when I get there, again, I'm operating QRP. I usually set up and tear down pretty quickly, and a tree is usually what's holding my antenna up. A Coke bottle rather, filled halfway up with a string around it, and I chuck it over a tree, and then you don't have to really worry. The only trick is getting your Coke bottle back down so you don't leave it hanging in a tree. All right, tools. Checked. Okay. The times that I haven't done checked, which is when I've forgotten, have been the times that the TSA agents have ended up with a nice tool collection.
Jack, you didn't mention what kind of passports you're traveling on. Diplomatic?
It depends.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm...
Diplomatic, you can take that in your pocket.
I'm not so sure about that. Yeah, so there's an issue where if it's plain safety versus a diplomatic issue, plain safety would trump it. So if you attempt to walk through with a weapon that they can find, then you're in trouble. So, okay, extensible pole. So for certain places I go, like mountaintops, there's no tree. So you have to bring your own tree along. So there are a few options here. One is to bring like an extensible crappie pole, a fishing pole. This one's made by Soda Beams in the UK, and it runs about $70 US, and it extends to 10 meters. So this thing is 33 feet long and weighs about just over a kilo, and the top of it is mighty thin and floppy, but for pulling up a wire antenna, this is the way to go, and it just goes into your checked luggage, goes diagonally across, and then you don't have to worry. It comes with some tent stakes if you want to stake it out. Usually I just bring some duct tape with me and duct tape it to something, maybe a fence or a pole or something that I find there. All right, what is the difference between column A and column B? Anybody?
Okay, that's antenna line.
Things you take off.
All right, B is things you take off, basically things that you wear. All right, and A, right, column A is stuff that you would like to have for your radio that are considered potential lethal weapons by TSA because you could choke people to death with them. So string like a Mason line is a problem. String like a shoelace is not. A coiled item like coax is considered deadly, but a belt is not. Gorilla tape is a problem, but a belt isn't. Again, it depends who you run into. There's a lot of inconsistency too going through screening from country to country, or especially within the U.S. with TSA, compliance with its own rules. So all of those things, unless you can wear them in some way, I would put them into the checked luggage. I have had string confiscated or wire confiscated, from the computer bag, amongst a nest of other wires that are used for the computer. But if it's like radio wire, that's different. So I don't look for the logic here. Just put it in checked. All right, now we're getting to the big money, the sealed lead acid battery. Nothing puts terror in the heart of a TSA agent than seeing you plunk out the 12 amp hour lead acid battery, because that means they're going to have to look up what do they do with this thing. This is clearly not good. And my first exposure to this was on a trip to Sweden. First time I'd taken HT radio with me on a flight. I was at Dulles, and the TSA agent said, "Can you please open your bag, take that out? We are not sure what that is." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, it's a lead acid battery, and I looked on your website, and it's allowed. And if you look there, you'll see, this is fine." I said, "Okay, I'll just put it on the belt." I'm like, "Well, it's going to look like it just looked a minute ago." So we went through again, and they said, "Well, we can't see through it." I said, "Well, it's right." So the first word in lead acid battery is lead. So what we can do is rotate the battery, because the plates are probably parallel, and you'll probably get the beam through, if we rotate it orthogonally. Okay, so that was the end of that battery, $40 battery down. And he said, "You can go, if you want, you can go talk to our supervisor, go back through security, go back to the A terminal, go through, there's this office that you'll eventually find." It's like, "Well, I got an hour to get my flight. I guess you got a battery." So good news is on the Swedish side, I hooked up with the Swedish ham immediately. We went to the store next door. We had a great time. He took me to see all of his ham friends. It was a great way to get acquainted and to tell them about how American airports work.
But that's as big as a lecture. You can't take more than 100 amp hours.
Right. There's a limit on the size of lead acid battery. So this is the FAA's. Yeah, exactly. This is the FAA statement on it. Commit this to memory. Basically, the battery that you get should be sealed lead acid, which means that the inside of it, the acidy part, is all soaked up within a fiberglass mat. And if you drop this thing or you saw it in half, acid's not going to come pouring out of it. It's just going to, be there. So if your battery on the side of it says that it complies with Code of Federal Regulations 49, yada, 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 then that battery should be okay according to the FAA's criteria to take on. And there are different restrictions on the size of the battery. So for this sort of battery, for general consumer electronics use, 100 watt hour. So your amp hours times the voltage. So basically you can go up to 8, 9 or so. There are some provisions, if you really wanted to push it, for medical equipment, like a wheelchair. There are people who travel with these little scooters and so on. I mean, if you're willing to go to that extent for your radio, yes, bring the scooter, and then you can have, basically a car battery along. Now, the other thing I do when I bring these I've gone on the web and I've printed out the material safety data sheet because nothing, is as impressive as paperwork. So the material safety data sheet says, tells all about the battery and how to handle it and so on. And I highlight the section, in this case, section 14 on transport, which has issues specific to the U.S. and transportation within the U.S., the IATA regulations related to the battery and so on. So whether you're domestic or international, those sections may carry some weight. And again, it just shows that you're not, just doing this off the cuff. You know what you're doing. So there's a plastic bag that goes around the battery. The battery has its plastic tabs on it, tape across those tabs. This within the second bag that goes around it. On each bag, you write sealed lead acid battery, so it's all up and up. People can see it. And every bag from there out should say sealed lead acid battery. In case there's a problem with the bag, they can know what's going on with it. Now, checked or carry-on or computer. I'll tell you, it's too big to go in the computer bag, so checked or carry-on.
I checked for it.
Yeah, so the logical answer would be to carry it on, because if there's a problem with it, you'd rather have it in the cabin of the plane than in the baggage hold. The real answer is put it in the hold because you don't want it to get confiscated. Because if you give TSA the choice, there's a chance it'll go. If you put it in checked, I've never had a problem with one of them. So while logic may tell you one thing, practicality tells you something else.
Practicality says, I don't want to haul that thing around.
Yeah, well, it's also heavy. That's true.
Also, you could attach
And
radio and
now,
definitely have
I was in India a couple months ago, and they asked me, is there a battery in your baggage? And I was like, well, there's tons of batteries in my bag. I mean, even if I weren't doing ham radio stuff, there would be batteries in my baggage. That's kind of a vague question. Is there an automotive battery? Is there a battery bigger than 100 watt hours? Is there a relevant battery? And I made the mistake of saying, yes, there is a battery, because I wasn't sure, what they were looking for, and I knew what the regulations were, and that turned into a nightmare. So the answer is no. There is no battery relevant within the bag, if they ask, because if they then find one, you can say, oh, that battery, yeah, I forgot about that battery. That battery's in the bag. So the other thing I do with all of these batteries is I make a sticker up, very nice printed sticker with lots of important words on it. Like U.S. regulatory and IMDG and IATA. I basically take the verbiage from the material safety data sheet and I stick that on the battery. And when they inspect the battery, this has helped me a few times. I've just pointed at those things, and there have been some nods, even where we can't really communicate due to language, and it goes back in and everything is okay. So I think that sticker has helped, even though it has absolutely no.
So you sell those
Yeah. All right. So that's sealed lead acid battery. They're heavy. They are relatively power dense. They tend to drop off in voltage at a certain point and not be usable. So it's a pain to go up a mountain with a lead acid battery. But the alternative would be something that is less acceptable to people doing the security screening, because lithium equals terrorist. FAA regulations actually allow you now to take lithium batteries, LiPo, any of the lithium chemistries, and you can have up to a certain size, 100 watt hours again, including separate batteries and so on. There are some regulations, like they say you can bring a power tool lithium battery. Well, TSA doesn't allow you to bring power tools, so you can't bring that if it's in association with a power tool. But the FAA regulations, and the same material is on the TSA website. It precisely parallels it, but I have seen a lot of lithium batteries confiscated. And has anyone had a lithium battery confiscated from a consumer electronic product? No? Well, I'm talking to other friends of mine that have done radio that have attempted to bring lithium with them. It usually doesn't end very well. So my advice is, suck it up, bring the lead acid battery and leave the lithium. For the FD817, there was an aftermarket lithium battery that was marketed, and I ordered it, and it goes into the bottom compartment, replacing the NiCad that used to come with the FD817. And I wondered how this could possibly be, because there's also postal issues about mailing lithium batteries. And what I got in the mail was not what I expected. I expected to get that blue battery pack. What I got was that white, like, computer charger thing on the right. Well, that's how they send it. And the first thing you do is you crack that thing open and take the battery out and throw away the 10 cents of electronics, because apparently you can ship that, but you can't ship a lithium battery. Yeah, it's installed. It was installed in the device till I ripped it out and stuck it in my radio. So that's what it looks like when it's installed into the FD817. So again, it doesn't say lithium anything on the outside, and so far I've been okay with this. So I have the internal battery that gives me a certain amount of operating time at 2.5 watts, and then I usually carry the lead acid. And the idea is that if the lead acid gets confiscated, well, the radio can still operate for a little while using that. All right, antennas. There are a lot of portable antenna choices. The buddy pole is a popular one. It's a little bit heavy. It's large and rod-like, so that's going to go into checked, because you could beat somebody with a rod. The loop antenna, yeah, that's a matter of a tripod and a piece of coax, so you can beat and strangle people with it. So it goes into the checked. The arrow antenna, if you're operating VHF, is very small and compact. Basically goes in a tube, again into checked luggage. What I usually use, though, is just one of these end-fed, trail-friendly LNR precision antennas, and they cover multiple bands. So the 10, 20, 40 antenna is what I use, and it basically folds down to that and goes into my my bag with the radio.
Don't you bring that on? That doesn't go in the check? It's not.
Yeah, no, that's a garrote, so it goes into the checked. Yeah. All right. So not everybody is QRP. Some people are 100 watts. Dennis, where are you? I know you're at least 100. So if you're going to travel with a bigger rig, it's going to be your checked luggage. And you're not going to. I wouldn't risk putting it. I'm sorry, it's not checked. It's carry-on. I wouldn't risk putting it into the hold. I don't want to be away from my K3. So I would put it in some kind of Pelican-like case. This is one from Starlight that's been pretty popular. They use these a lot for firearms, and the case comes with a foam that you can pluck out these little hex patterns and stick your radio in kind of a form-fit foam rubber mold.
Harbor Freight recently came out
Yep.
with their own line of Pelican-like cases. I have one of the small ones for my thermal camera, and it was pretty good. I don't know if it's 100% waterproof, but
I was going to say, do you want to trust something your rating to?
Well, Pelican is the gold standard, I'd say. John?
Do you know anything about the security locks? That is the locks that can be opened by TSA?
Well, those locks can be opened by everybody, because it's all the same keys. I wouldn't recommend them. I don't think they do anything helpful at all. Basically, and you also see in some airports, especially like in Africa, where they'll wrap the bag multiple times in plastic, and they will advertise that as like a security thing, because people will have to mess with that for a while, and it'll be obvious if there's tampering. I don't do that either. I just don't put anything really that valuable. It's my microphone, the antennas, but those aren't going to be helpful for people unless they're in ham radio. So those things usually don't get plucked out of checked baggage. So oversized items. There are a number of pieces of equipment that are used by DXpeditions, and when the manufacturer makes them, they almost always think about the shipping size for air freight, which is 158 centimeters linear. So height, width, depth, add them together and try to come out less than 158. So my spider beam mast that I had in Madagascar, that's in a long, thin box. My hex beam was in a slightly fatter but squatter box, but they all came out to exactly 158 centimeters. So think about that when you go, and that counts in place of a checked bag for your allotment. So the radio kit except for the transceiver, is going into checked. So I have a camera bag that I stick into my checked bag, and it says on it, sealed lead acid battery. It also says wheelchair, in case I have to exploit that loophole. And basically, that's my go bag list of things that I put in there. And every time I go somewhere and cross a U.S. border, I get one of those little notes from TSA in there. And I've now collected a fairly good stack of them. And I wish that they would stamp them with the state or the airport, because I'd really like to get WAS, TSA. All right, so here's a hint. Ammo cans make great containers, but less so for air flight. And you know, a lot of stuff is marketed to hams as kind of paramilitary, you know, junior forest ranger. Avoid the camo and avoid the khaki, because it'll just get their attention. I have a foldable bail on my FD817, which is green. And when I went through Nairobi, they asked me, so is this military equipment? I said, why? I said, well, it's green. Okay, no. Okay. It might be worth considering, especially if you're flying in the US a lot, getting TSA pre-approved, because you go faster through it. I think because you're a somewhat trusted traveler, they look a little bit less carefully. You get to keep your shoes on. You don't have to take your computer out of the bag, so maybe other things in the computer bag just slide through. If you're coming back into the US, global entry really speeds things up rather than going through the whole customs process. And again, because you're in a smaller, somewhat more trusted group, I think the level of scrutiny is a little bit less, and you're more likely to slide through with whatever you're bringing. Yep.
I was just going to say, if you get global entry, it includes pre-check.
That's right. Global entry is 5 years, $100, includes TSA pre. All right. There have been situations where I've not been sure I was going to get through with some of the stuff I had in my bags. And in those cases, my solution is to bring toothpaste. And I'll usually throw that in the computer bag, because their eyes will go immediately to toothpaste. You could have, you know, a thermonuclear device in there, but if they see the toothpaste larger than 100 milliliters, that will get flagged and you'll get a talking to. But then the other stuff will very likely go through. So, toothpaste. All right, so I have some do's and don'ts, and I realize it's too small to read, but maybe if you download this, do pack slightly underweight, because your scale that you're using may be off, and you don't want to get hit with an overweight charge. And sometimes when you get to the airport, you don't want to be moving things from bag to bag, because that's when mistakes happen and your moldy tool ends up in your computer bag and gets confiscated. Not that that's happened. Think about moving things around before you get to the airport if you have to. Don't put anything scary in your carry-on, put it in the hold. Make sure everything is switched off. Split up the radio and the accessories. Stamp stuff liberally with important looking words and multiple packaging, and make everything very clear. Don't ask about procedures. You know, you don't want to attract attention. The last thing you want to say is, so, you know, like, what is the limit on lithium batteries, you know, watt-wise, you know, because that'll get you in a conversation you don't want to be in. Don't volunteer anything. Just keep to very short, direct answers. Don't bring up their own regulations. That is not a good way. I've seen many people going down the tubes, you know, on the line at the airport, trying to convince TSA that they're not following their own procedures, and that doesn't end well. Yeah, I mean, basically, it's common sense sort of things, and anything that looks like a weapon should go into the checked. All right, so that's the 95% on the front. So then the 5% on the back, I actually have less experience with. When you get out of the plane, you get your stuff at baggage claim. If you're international, you've got to go through customs then. And most of the places I've gone have been under CEP treaty or have been, you know, fairly friendly countries where I haven't had an issue, and I've just walked straight through the green line. I guess my advice is walk straight through the green line, because I don't know what happens if you go to the red line. I know some people in the club have worked in the Caribbean or operate in the Caribbean and have had to pay entry tariffs. And Well, my understanding is like people who go down and work, in Curacao or something for a contest, if they're bringing a radio with them, very often it's one of the ways that the country makes money by having a tariff on things as they come in, and they also want to make sure that what you're bringing in goes back out, so they probably give you a piece of paper to show on the way back out. So again, that's country by country, and ARRL has a website about operating overseas, and each one, is going to differ, so look it up beforehand. And green is your friend. All right, final slide. Inevitably, something won't make it. So this is my beach trip where I packed everything except the paddle for the radio. And my solution was that the hotel has some excess hardware in the kitchen. So that's an O-ring that went around the sink, I think, and a knob from one of the cabinets, and various screws from furniture and so on. Anyhow, it made a functional key, and headphones became the cord. Right, I was willing to sacrifice a pair of headphones, and this did not work. This is version 1. So version 1, as soon as I connected it up, the rig keyed, and I didn't understand why. I looked at everything. It was defying the rules of physics that it was keying because no metal was making contact. And I finally came down to the fact that the wood was conductive because I got it from the beach, and it was loaded with salt and somewhat wet, and the wood itself was making the contact. So I got another piece of wood, and then I was on the air. So the point here is make a checklist before you go and make sure that you've packed what you think you've packed, because all of your tricks getting through the airport aren't going to matter if you don't have the equipment. All right. So that's it. Can I ask if anyone else has any horror stories that they'd like to share about trauma going through airports or similar?
Well, it's not really hand gear, but I used to do a fair amount of professional photography, and I had a really fun experience at National Airport. I had shipped in advance a footlocker and a Pelican case with 3 camera bodies, about 7 lenses. But one of the things I had to hand carry on, because I had been told in advance by other photographers, you can't put it in your stuff because they will x-ray it and they'll get all confused.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a thing called a ring flash. And it sort of looks like a big donut, and the lens of your camera goes through it, and your camera mounts to it. And so I'm going through National Airport, heading up to Chicago for some photo shoots, and I have to go through check baggage and all that, and they say, you have to fire it up. And I'm like, you realize this is going to create a real bright flash? And they're like, yes. I said, I have a variety of power settings. What power setting do you want? Maximum. So we find an electrical outlet, and these 3 TSA guys who are now looking at this. This was like, I think the summer of 2006, and it was, let's put it this way, on the way out, everything was fine, but on the way back, it was worse because while I was out there, they had caught some guy, I guess, in England who had stuff in his shoes. So we got the liquid thing. So I plug this thing in, and I fire up, and I say, you probably want to close your eyes. It's going to be that bright. No, they don't. I close my eyes. I hit the button. Everyone in that terminal decided that, oh my God, something has just gone off. And broke loose. And so there were then now about 15 TSA guys around. And once the guys who I had originally talked to said, it's just a flash. It's a professional flash unit. Then everyone settled down, but for about 5 minutes, it was pure chaos. There were people on the floor and everything else. So, yes, it could be really interesting.
Okay, well.
But that's one of the reasons why if you can ship it in advance and have it go to your hotel and then make arrangements like a month before you actually check into that hotel for setting things up for the return trip, so that they will have your Pelican case, your footlocker and all that, and all they have to do is arrange for a freight company to pick it up. It's so much easier, and it actually ended up costing me less than when I was trying to have the airline take it as freight.
Yeah, that's a good thought, especially for domestic. Just ship it, and then you don't have to worry about it. Oh, I have one more suggestion. I don't know where I put my bag.
Here, it's right here.
Oh, if you pass it over. So the Gorilla Tape. So Gorilla Tape's useful for everything, but they don't like you bringing it on board. This is my duct tape. So I don't bring it on the big roll. I pull off a bunch of it and I just double it back on itself a number of times. And they're worried that you're going to get on, and after you incapacitate the crew and their air marshal, you'll tape them to the seat and gag them and so on. So this is not going to really attract their attention. So this just goes in the pocket of the computer bag, and I've never had a problem with that. That is absolutely innocuous. It just looks like, I don't know, paper, maybe on an X-ray. All right. I think we'll go wrap it up. Thanks.